What's up, everybody? The Garage Beer's out. It's flowing. It's time for another edition of Garage Beer Presents the DAD, the Dudes After Dark Pod. I'm your host, Tony Lane. We got Damon and Johnsy, and we're joined tonight by 33-year vet, U.S. Customs and Border Protection agent, Evan. That's right, just Evan. We'll figure that out later. But let's get into the show. This will be a good one. Let's go.
Welcome to the Dude Network, where we chill and unwind. Food, sports, entertainment, the best of its kind. Grab your buddies, have a seat, let's have a good time. 4 nights a week, we'll make sure you feel just fine. Join us as we dive into the coolest trends. Dude Network, where the fun never ends. Dude Network, where the fun never ends. Hanging out with the dudes and dudettes. Talking about the things we love, no regrets. Tune in, relax, and let the good vibes flow. The Dude Network, the place to go.
What is up?
What's
What
up?
up?
Happy Friday,
House.
everybody. Happy Friday.
I'm gonna go right here off the bat.
Uh-oh.
That garage beer right at the end, when you crack it one hand, that thing looks so refreshing.
I ain't gonna lie, I haven't had one in a few days, so that was.
You know how many of them are full to the brim that just like gush out for that little
Dude, this
surprise
one was.
party?
I thought it was going to I swear the can was like bowing out from fluid. So the can says 12 ounces, but guaranteed some of these say 12.5.
Be careful with cans that start distending, buddy. The last can that I had that started changing shape had some questionable fish inside of it.
Yeah, we can agree that this is garage beer is a little safer to consume than a Sursterman.
Yeah.
True.
Yep.
Fun
Johnsy-
fact: that video made a crazy buzz around my mom's a teacher, made a crazy buzz around her school recently.
It's right there on still the main.
That's awesome.
I don't know how to change it. I need to figure out how to switch that video out. But it's quite the message we send to people finding the Dude Network for the first time. I will say that it's aggressive. They're like, man, these are some wild dudes.
They're sitting out in a garden, throwing up
Real and relatable, and then we have John's eating Surfman right off the rip, which is like the most unreal and unrelatable thing ever. So,
yeah.
Johnsy,
Yo,
Damon, first off, happy to have you guys here. Johnsy, you helped get all this one set up here tonight. Give us a little background here, bud. This is going to be really cool. This is a subject we have never tackled. So, how did this happen?
yeah, and it's kind of like a shout out to the Brothers in Blue, but a different law enforcement agency. So Evan is a good friend of my dad. Like, they've known each other since they were in high school or before or something. And the story I always heard growing up was when Evan ran for class president, and he ran as like a mobster theme. And my dad and their other buddy Al was the muscle. And this is awesome. Back when a little bit different times, and they had it all set up. A guy said, "I'm not voting for you." My dad and Al pull out firearms and shoot blanks at the guy.
Definitely different times.
This is in Southern California, by the way.
Yeah.
Well,
my dad grew up in Southern California, so anyway, from capping kids in high school, not voting for him for president, all the way up to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, man.
Hell yeah.
oh my God.
So, super excited for this one.
He's probably like,
He's
probably never getting it now.
Yeah,
He's like,
God
God dang
dang
it.
the show. He's like, we're going to have to redo that because that's not good.
Well, let's bring him in without further ado.
I don't think he needs any more introduction after that.
Yeah. To the man that allegedly did some things that have not been confirmed or denied, Evan.
Hi, guys. You know what? I think you can keep it in. The statute of limitations has since passed. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it was blanks, you know. I mean they do it in Hollywood all the time, and you were in South California.
But I think it was a 357 Magnum. I mean,
Oh, dude.
he brought in the real thing.
It's a honker, bro. It's a honker.
It was the real deal with blanks. That's wild.
I couldn't believe it when he brought that thing in because I'm like, you got that, in the gym? Are you kidding me? Nobody.
He was like meant to grow up in Texas or something.
It was loud. It was
Yeah.
Goodness.
That's funny. I lost, so it didn't do much. Well,
Oh, what?
That's all
How
right.
can you lose
Our
after that?
student body didn't empower you to be their leader. I mean,
Like I said, it was Southern California, so that's probably why.
That's all right. And we could blame my dad anyway. But
man.
hey,
So,
thanks, Dad, for helping us set this up. By the
Yeah,
way,
for sure.
Thanks,
shout out
Pops.
Papa John's.
Papa John.
Ooh, didn't mean to do that, but the original.
The original Papa John's.
Right.
That's what I always say too.
Yep. The rest are just fugazi.
Mhm.
But Evan, thanks again for joining us here tonight, man. This is going to be a really cool subject that we have never really dove into, and so to have someone with your experience willing to kind of shed like the truthful light on the situation, and also just talk about it at like the topic in general, like the stuff you don't hear about every day, you know, just the wild, the wonderful, the West that was 33 years in the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Now, is the Border Protection different than the Border Patrol?
Yeah. So when I joined originally, it was with the U.S. Customs Service. This was back in 1988. And just to give you a little bit of understanding, you've heard of INS, which is Immigration and Naturalization Service. They don't exist anymore. Okay. And U.S. Customs was the other border agency that handled the ports of entry. And after 9/11 in 2001, the government saw fit to create the Department of Homeland Security. And when they did that, they merged U.S. Customs with INS into one agency. Now, this is the group that handles the ports of entry, or the legal locations where you can actually enter the country. U.S. Border Patrol handles
All the other.
outside of the ports of entry, where you're trying to clandestinely enter the country, kind of thing. So, U.S. Border Patrol was placed in Department of Homeland Security under the new agency that was formed called U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So you've got Border Patrol on one side and Customs and Border Protection field operations on the other side. One handles the ports of entry and the other handles outside the ports of entry.
Got it. Okay.
Interesting.
Already,
We work hand in hand with those guys all the time.
Right. I'm sure.
yeah, I'm sure Intel crossing of Intel's very vital in that situation for sure. So,
Yeah.
David Johnsey, go ahead.
So let's start it off. How did you end up in customs? Like what that career choice?
You know, it was almost a mistake. You know, I wasn't planning on it. I mean, what happened was I got my bachelor's degree and it was in political science, and I was job hunting and really not finding anything out there. So I applied for customs, and it took them like 2 years to get around to hiring me. Meanwhile, I went and got my master's. I got an MBA, and so I finished with the graduate program. I had some job interviews lined up in South America because I had studied international affairs and that kind of thing. And
Nice.
I had some contacts down in Argentina, went down there and interviewed, and nothing really lined up. When I came back to the States a few months later, this job offer was hanging out there, and it was pathetic. I mean, they were offering nothing. I looked at my first pay stub, and it said that I think my annual salary was $17,000 something a year. Or something.
Jeez, man.
Seems feasible in Southern California.
But I took it because you could double your salary in overtime type of thing.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up doing that, and 30 plus years later, I stayed with it. I had a few offers along the way, but for the most part, I really liked what I was doing. You establish a camaraderie with the fellows out there in the
Right.
border and that kind of thing. And there's nothing like a camaraderie in law enforcement setting when you're all in one location, fighting the war on drugs type of thing. So
Right.
I enjoyed it and stuck with it. And here I am.
Okay.
No, at one point for a long time, you or your team had like the biggest pot bust in San Diego, right?
Well, I think everybody has that title at one time or another. If you're just doing your job, you're going to find drugs. And
Right.
But yeah, my breakthrough happened when I was working at Otay Mesa, a cargo facility where all the trucks come in. I just happened to finish a training mission in Texas where they taught us to use a lot of high-tech equipment. Now, this is back in the early 90s. So
Right.
high-tech equipment was stuff
Not so
that you could buy at Home Depot nowadays,
Right.
But I was using this rangefinder, a laser rangefinder, which is at that time was this big old apparatus you put on your shoulder like a big camcorder or something.
Right.
Now you just buy them; they're like little pencil-sized thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And we had empty trucks coming in at a certain time of the day, and so myself and another partner, we just started zapping the insides of tractor trailers, or the trailers rather, and got the measurements and compared it to what it was supposed to be, and found a false wall. And we
okay.
Bingo.
it was like 2,000 pounds of coke. So it was a big deal at the time.
Ton of weed.
It was coke, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was, and that was a big deal because we had.
Oh yeah.
Nope, I might be a little bit like, I mean, that's kind of a waste, but but the coke, like, it's gotta go.
Oh, sure.
The street value of that much.
Well, we put on a good show and essentially, put on a show with the driver that we hadn't found it, contacted.
Did you play it?
They followed it. They followed it through 5 counties and arrested a bunch of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Did you play with any evidence, like make a fake 3-pointer with a block of kilo or something? Like, like play hot potato with one? Like, come on.
Playing Super Troopers.
Yeah.
Well, in a case like that, when you find something, you try to keep it. You try to keep it on the down low so the driver doesn't know that you found it. So that way you can do a controlled delivery. And so that it worked out really good. They followed it through 5 counties. It ended up in Ventura County, and arrested.
Oh, Damon's frothing at the mouth.
Yeah, Damon does a good job of not telling us what agency he's secretly with, Evan. So maybe if you'd like to weigh in on this by the end of the show, we would appreciate a professional's input and opinion.
Sure.
Good luck.
Not a problem. But I'm not saying that I was really talented at finding loads. Everybody runs across it just in the process of doing your job every day, in the quantity of stuff that was crossing the border.
Oh, I'm
You're gonna come
sure.
across that stuff. Yeah.
Right.
So did you ever work with anybody that was just an absolute wolf?
Yeah.
Like they knew something was going on that was kind of like a big, and they were like, you got this special dude they bring in, and you're like, oh, the man. Like,
well, there's some guys that just have this sixth sense and they're able to spot stuff.
Mhm.
So I remember one guy in particular. The way it would work when you were working the passenger lanes was you would rotate in every half hour, changing lanes and that kind of thing. You do a rotation, then you'd come out to the lot and do examinations of vehicles that were sent in. And this guy, there's one particular day I was assigned to the office. So I was handling anybody that would be walked in and be patted down, and you'd have to take control of them. And if they had drugs or something, you have to get them in the cell and get everything organized and that kind of thing. Well, he came in the first push 5 minutes into the shift, and he's got a load. And I go, hey, Bob, that's pretty good. Good start. And he said, yeah. I'm in a hot streak. I'm going for my record today. When I said, well, how many loads have you had in a shift? I've never had more than 4. I'm like, 4? Geez, that's amazing, So he's got 8 pushes out there, and 4 4 pushes in, he's got 4 loads every time he's walking a new one in, and then and it gets to be very difficult to manage that many loads because you have a lot of paperwork to do and you have to put the dope away and weigh it and get the perp in the cell and make sure that you're safe and he's patted down and you're contacting agents who are going to come down and interview him. There's just a lot of things to do. And 4 loads in after 4 pushes, it's like, there's no way we can continue this. And he said, no, I got 8 pushes. I'm going to get 8 loads today. And he did. He found 8 loads in one shift. It was unbelievable.
Nice, man.
How long is the shift? 8 hours?
It was 8 hours. Yeah, it was 8 hours.
Good.
So yeah, there are guys. There are guys. This guy had a sixth sense. I think the fact that he didn't speak any Spanish helped him because he didn't trust anybody. And so if he saw somebody or he saw some nervousness that he sensed, he'd just go with his gut. Whereas, I spoke Spanish and I could have guys talk me out of stuff. That makes sense when he said, yeah, go ahead, get around. So, and the thing is, it's interesting. You get a guy like that, and they're really good at finding contraband. And so then they promote them into a management position, and they're just terrible managers. It's kind of like Magic Johnson. He's a great player, but he couldn't coach worth anything. Because he expected everybody to be like him. So
Heard it here first.
Yeah, a lot of guys have that. Yeah, a lot of guys have that with that natural instinct that didn't like. It's hard for them to relate as a teacher. It's like, well, you should just pick it up. I shouldn't have to explain it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Dave, what you got?
No, go ahead. Keep going. I'm good. I'm soaking it in right now.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, I was working the southern border, the first portion of my career. And so, I did that the first 8 years and then eventually took a promotion, went to an airport. And it's just a different world. You move from the land border to an airport environment. But
so talk to us about the differences a little bit in that, because that was one of my questions.
Well, at southern borders, back when I was there, it was a Wild West, and it still is.
Right.
So you just don't know what's coming at you. Nothing's vetted. Unlike international flights, most of these people have gone through layers of security before they get to you.
Mm-hmm.
So your risk's a little different. It's a cleaner environment. You're not dealing with the dirt and this. It's not as risky either because you got a secure area where people are. Whereas at a border, if you want to just run or you're in a vehicle, you just punch it and you're a port runner and you just run right on through. So there's that. I mean, I remember my first years working that border, you'd work a midnight shift on a weekend. And you get, this was in San Diego. So you
all the drunk college people and everything.
Or you got Shore Patrol who was working there normally too. So, you got the Navy and the Marines that go down and get drunk and they come back and he's walking through pedestrian and his face is all sliced up and things like that. You'd run across things like that. And then there's just you go through these waves where the smugglers will do certain things. Like there was a wave of time where a lot of people were just running the port, or the smugglers would hire high school kids to pay them a few $100s to drive their load across the border, and they wouldn't stop for anything, and there were shootings and that kind of thing. Every now and then. So it was a lot more dangerous, I thought, at the southern border. You always have to keep your guard up everywhere, but it just seems like
right.
That's actually one thing it leads to a question I have for you, Evan. Obviously, I think it's safe to say that the Border Patrol and Customs, like, it's always associated with just like bad, traumatic disaster, or just a lot of like negativity. Was there a lot? What was the most prideful thing about your job? Things that you can say like, well, we did this and it was really good, and no one ever talks about. These are some of the good things that our team did.
Well, a lot of times when you've got a situation where like there's a child who's been kidnapped, or there's some type of child labor type of thing going on when you're able to intercept something like that or crack it, it's quite rewarding.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think those are probably the most.
We don't hear those stories, you know.
I really can't go into much of those, but
Yeah.
those I'm just saying that those are the most rewarding when you're able to see
Right.
it out. I mean, sure, it's great when you're catching drugs and such. It's fun, but we all know it's a needle haystack type of thing, and a lot of stuff gets past us. And
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of dent are we making? It's hard to tell.
Right.
And it changes from year to year, and you can kind of judge it by what the value of stuff is. The dope is on the street, how much stuff is coming in.
Do you ever see a slowdown of it influx in? Do you think there'll ever be a slowdown?
Yeah, there's dry spells, and especially like at that southern border, you got those wars between all the different cartels and such, and so there would be a period of time where, like, we're gonna find a bunch of dope, and then all of a sudden it stops,
Mm-hmm.
And what happened? Well, there's a war between the cartels, and they're filtering it through other places, or they dug a tunnel somewhere and they're getting it past us. We have no idea where it is.
True.
Did you ever? No, you wouldn't be at the port, so that wouldn't be considered a port of entry. So you wouldn't have been involved in like the underground tunnels and stuff like that.
Well, interestingly, there were a few tunnels that were built like right under the port of entry. There was one location where I worked where
The most obvious is the least obvious.
Right under the
Do it right up under your nose.
I wasn't an investigator involved in it or anything. I just found out about it later.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever come across any crazy like big art heists or art people trying to smuggle crazy artifacts or art or anything?
Yeah, in later years, when I was a manager up in San Francisco, we handled our mail facility, and a lot of stuff was being shipped through there because it's sent anonymously, so you can't really catch people with it. So we had like Egyptian mummies and some pre-Columbian stuff,
Crazy.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And when we were able to, take photographs of it and send it to some experts, they determined, oh yeah, this was stolen at such and such museum in Cairo.
Oh, crazy.
Would be. I mean, it would be that. I ain't gonna lie, that'd just be cool. That would be.
Yeah, that would just be kind of crazy.
Yeah, I got some pictures of that somewhere, but yeah, I had run across some of that, not a lot.
Right.
At the mail facilities or in the cargo environment, you'd run across that kind of thing.
Weird. Do you remember? So, what's like the funniest story you think you witnessed? Like,
ooh, great question.
Like how? I cannot believe my eyes are watching this unfold right now.
Well, this is many years ago, but I remember we used to have these motorhomes that would come from Baja. They'd come way down south. You usually have a bunch of retirees, a bunch of guys, a bunch of dudes fishing. They'd come back with their coolers and ice chests full of mahi and all the fish that they had got, and we really didn't enjoy doing these examinations because they were really cumbersome. You know how many excuse me how many hiding places there are within a motorhome. I mean, it just takes forever to go through it. And if you don't have a dog available, then you got to do it by hand and go through each compartment one by one, that kind of thing. And I got assigned to one, and I was looking, and there was all the guys, they were all in their like 60s, 70s. Geez, that's my age now. They've all got out of the vehicle, and they're all sitting down, and they're laughing it up and yucking it up while I'm doing my examination. And I noticed that there's a person sitting in a back seat. It's got a sheet over him from top to bottom, like, oh, really? They're trying to smuggle a guy in here? They're this bad? You could have at least hit him somewhere or something.
Right.
And so I went up to him real close, and I had my flashlight, and I just tapped him on the knee to see if, the knee would react.
That's right.
No movement. What the heck? I don't know. This guy had died the day before. He was on
Yes.
ice. He was on ice, and
Weekend at Bernie's.
they'd already notified his wife and everything, and they were just going to drive him across and take him like straight to the funeral home, you know. And this, you know,
Wow.
Weekend at Bernie's.
I
in
said,
the-
you guys-
Weekend
Yeah,
at Bernie's.
dude.
What's with the dead guy back here? And the guys, oh yeah, that's Fred. Yeah, he died 2 days ago. We notified him.
Holy crap.
Yeah,
That's
that's,
wild.
yeah. God rest him. Yeah.
What do you? Yeah, that's not legal though, right?
No,
Yeah.
they held him up forever. We had to nail the coroner down and everything. Yeah, they wanted to avoid all of that, and they were just hoping they could just cover him up and.
Dude,
That's
if they would
incredible.
have smuggled the dead body back in, took him straight to the coroner, and like, could you imagine? I mean, I'm still imagining the red tape they had to go through. Like so no foul play. Like, yeah, I mean, what if Jim Bob got in a little tussle and they're like, nah, he died a couple days ago, old age. Like, yeah.
We're not even stressed about it. You're just like, oh yeah, that's Bob. He died a couple days ago.
That's bizarre.
Cancer bed. That was his last trip. That's the only way it's that peaceful.
I mean, I've had things like where you open up a trunk and there's a bag and the bag moves. And you're like, oh, what is it? And there's like snakes in there and
Nope.
Right.
like that.
Nope.
So
Yeah.
that's the one thing I was always very leery about that because I didn't want to get bit by a rattlesnake or something, you know. But
Nope.
No, would they put like booby traps around something? Like, would they put like rattlesnakes and copperheads and things around like the drugs and everything? Yeah, like oh, there might be drugs in here. Like, oh my God, scorpions everywhere.
I never ran across it. I wouldn't want to give them the idea to do that, but
Yeah, good for you, Tony. Wow.
Yeah, way to go, too much, Tony.
He
Way
made
to
to
go.
think of the one thing that these guys haven't come up with yet. Son of a bitch. My brain's a beautiful place, Evan. It really is.
Way to go.
no, that's fine.
I don't condone this behavior, but Evan is retired, so he doesn't care.
And it's been so many years since I worked the border. It's almost like if anybody's listening to this who's with CBP right now, they're like, "Guy, man, so much time has passed." I mean, he's like grandpa. So much has changed, in the last 20 years. So, but
what has been so you're 33 years, so you obviously worked in at least 3 different decades. What was your favorite decade in your career? You obviously you're a little bit of the 80s, not much, but obviously you're in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. So out of those, what was your favorite era to work in?
Well, I was really lucky. My last years, well, it wasn't my very last years, but the last decade, I got an assignment to headquarters. I actually knew there was a good friend that I worked at the southern border with, who became a director of international affairs at headquarters. So he said he needed me because he needed somebody to help him out with what was called the Technical Assistance Division. Customs had a group or a cadre of trainers that would go all over the world and help sister agencies of other countries train them on how to find smugglers and how to use equipment and that kind of thing. And so for a good 4-year period, just traveled the world, just traveled all over. I hit every continent except for Australia.
Nice.
And
That's cool. That's like the scariest place in the world.
yeah, and was able to teach classes and train people how to use equipment and that kind of thing. And then the last 2 years of that, I was we called it the CBP liaison at the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I was the lone guy in the whole country from CBP, and I just met with all our sister agencies. That would be their Coast Guard, their customs, their immigration, their who did they also with the Navy? There was another group. They had a group called the Gendarmería Nacional, which is it's like their border patrol.
Okay.
And I had a car, and it just like, oh, we got to teach a class at the Bolivian border, and I'd jump in it and drive, It's like driving from California to Kansas. It's such a big country.
Oof.
And I'm driving along, and there's llamas on the side of the road and stuff. It's just awesome. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And it's
Just
like
different. What's more than others is fascinating.
Yeah. And we worked on some programs there, and they were pretty high profile, and we shared a lot of information with them, intelligence and that kind of thing. So they were able to query their flights coming in for criminal activity, people coming in, work with Interpol, our customs targeting center, which essentially profiles individuals and determines who's high risk and that kind of thing. We really developed a good strategy with the group, and it was great. I hated it when it was over. It was just a blast working.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that you had that window where you can really, say like, I mean, because you're obviously really proud of that, and anybody to have a long career with an agency to have like that era like that, that's awesome that you got that fulfillment in a career for sure.
Well, the crazy thing about it is I was just a GS-14 civil servant, and I wasn't even at a director level. But then I got there, and I was the guy, and so I had meetings. I had a meeting with like their Secretary of State, their Secretary of Homeland Security. I knew them all, and on a first name basis. In fact, when they came to the States, they came to San Francisco. They like reached out to me and took them out to dinner and showed them around and that kind of thing. So these are guys that were really high level people in the government that really decent guys. And I came there and I felt so important, and I come back and I'm just a nobody. I come back to San Francisco and I made a call to my boss, and he said, "Well, did you run that through the chain of command?" And I said, "I just had a meeting with the president of Argentina last week, and now I got to go through the chain of command to talk to you." So it was eye opening how that changed. You put back to
Right.
Dude, that's awesome. Who was the coolest, nicest, high level political member of a foreign nation you got to rub elbows with? Someone that you just had the highest amount of respect for?
It had to be the director of immigration in Argentina, a guy named Toto Garcia, and he was a very, very kind person. He'd light up a room when he'd come in. I mean, he's the kind of guy where you walk in and he just immediately commands respect, dressed impeccably, talked with authority, kind, he'd listen to you, that kind of thing. Just a great guy.
Very good.
Nice.
You said every continent except Australia. So does that mean Antarctica was visited?
Oh, that's true. That's right. I forgot about that.
I was hoping that was an exception. I was like, let's talk about the wall.
Yeah. We didn't have much need to go to Australia because their customs service is very, very advanced.
They are very, very law
now
enforcement.
working in the mail facility here, we had a liaison with the Australian Customs Service because the U.S. is exporting drugs to Australia. So they were always on the lookout for packages coming from the U.S. and seeing if we could flag them before they left or that kind of thing.
Right. Because that's essentially the goal when you go work with these other countries and agencies, is everybody works together to get it at the first stop before you guys vice versa have to catch it, correct?
Yeah. And CBP has what's called the National Targeting Center. It's based in near DC. It's in Reston, Virginia, where you've got an office just full of people doing intelligence, looking at manifests, looking at passenger cargo manifests. They're trying to determine trends when it comes to smuggling, that kind of thing. So we're always in coordination with those guys because they're
right. Okay.
And we had a few people from foreign nations who were assigned there. Australia was one of them. We got to know some people from Abu Dhabi, from Dubai, from Canada.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff coming from over there.
You don't know what could be coming from there. They got big money. They can make. They could
afford to send people to our training center there, and that was what it was. Is is the countries that were well off. They could afford to pay for the housing and put somebody in
Okay, and they're basically learning alongside you guys while you're doing actual work too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they're we can't show them everything, but for the most part, yeah.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
Yeah.
What was like one of the craziest or like more scariest moments in the career where you're like, oh man? Obviously one you can share.
Well, there was a time when
One that you're
I
not.
think I kind of mentioned it. We had a series of port runners that were just these kids who didn't really care. They would just drive across and run you down if you're in the way. So I know there was one situation I remember where I was in the lot and you hear tires squealing, and screeching, and you hear port runner, and everybody runs out, and the next thing you know, you hear a pop, and then there's another pop, and then it's like it's almost like everybody's got permission to open fire trying to run over somebody, and the kid was killed, but it was rather eye-opening. There was a period of time where we just had a bunch of those situations. We finally made some efforts to change the exit egress from the port of entry, so you couldn't just cross through a lane and just take off up the freeway. You had to meander through K rails where they set it up where so it wasn't so easy just to escape anymore.
Right. Okay. Right. How is I mean, obviously we know that technology changed immensely from the time, but how has that like shaped some of the stuff that you guys did?
Well, when I started, the only technology you had while working a vehicular lane was you had a computer. It was either an amber or green monitor where you would input a plate number before you, and it would come back and say yes or no. No meaning there's no record of that vehicle having any type of history, and yes meaning it could be anything from armed and dangerous to a guy who smuggles lemons. You have no idea what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So that has definitely changed over the years. Now you don't even have to punch in plates. It's all done. It's automatically scanned.
Yeah. Right.
Was it illegal to smuggle lemons?
Department of Agriculture frowns on citrus fruit coming from Mexico. Yeah. Because of the Mediterranean fruit fly, they can decimate the crops up in the States. Yeah. There's a list of items that are prohibited, that things like pork and trying to remember what else was there. Pork was
I know if you or at least for a while, nothing coming in with like the foot attached. That's why we could never get like true Iberico hams. It's because they still have the hoof attached to it.
Well, I'm pretty sure that from Mexico, there's no pork allowed, period. In fact, I don't think it's allowed from anywhere, because I've seen it at the airports where they're always going through the stuff.
Yeah, like
in China,
$7,000 hams getting confiscated.
They take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's cooked and they can prove that it's cooked, then they'll allow it in. But if it's not,
where I'm at, I mean, I'm up here we got the Canadian. Well, I got the northern border up here. So I know it's like when bringing fish in and stuff, like you have to leave like one of the fins on to show that it was one of those fish, because there's daily bag limits and stuff like that you're allowed to bring back.
I'm sure, I'm not familiar with what they have at the northern border. It might be state regulations with their Department of Fish and Game and that kind of thing. I know that I was dealing with California. We had a California Fish and Game that would be there, and they'd have specific rules about what they could bring back when they were hunting. But so every state, is different and that kind of thing. But we do have a representative from Fish and Wildlife, usually looking for endangered species, that kind of thing.
Right. Oh, yeah. Because I'm sure there's a lot of like, especially from South America and stuff, like the rainforest, you probably had a bunch of like birds and stuff like that, and reptiles and stuff trying to get smuggled in and stuff.
Yeah, and birds are interesting because a lot of times they'll just they'll dope up the birds and wrap them up in socks, and they'll be down
Oh,
pant legs and that kind of thing. So
yeah.
most of the time they don't survive, but it's worth it to them to get some of these parrots in. If you can get one or two through,
That's right.
it's worth the trip for them. Yeah.
That's wild, man.
Yeah, so now that you're bringing up a lot of this stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That was kind of a crazy story, When you're there every day, it's like, oh, it's just, normal
It's probably
day.
wild the things you just deem normal after
Right.
so long, like yeah, it's just another day. Like, yeah.
So one
Now-
thing. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
I was going to say, like, how long did it take for you to kind of adjust back to normal civilian life after this kind of day-to-day operations of everything you went? Sounds like you've seen it all, been through it all. So, I mean, that's a lot of, and you took it very seriously, obviously, Evan. You can tell that. So, how long did it take for you to kind of adjust back?
Well, my last years I was in the management role, so I'd always get excited that when I go into I was in charge of the cargo facility and our mail facility, and we had a lot of activity there. And so if our guys were finding drugs, I'd get pretty psyched about it, and I'd like to get my hands dirty and that kind of thing. But for the most part, I wasn't supposed to. I was supposed to just manage the op. We were really interested in trying to find fentanyl because that stuff is just so toxic.
Yes.
And we did run across a string where a lot of it was coming in, but it wasn't huge quantities like you'd have at the Mexican border. When it comes in the mail, it would be just coming in an envelope. People would order it on the dark web and it would come across, and it's just personal use amounts kind of thing. But you just had to be real careful because how lethal that stuff was.
Oh yeah.
So to answer your question, I wasn't really hands-on at the end. And so by the time I'd retired, it was kind of like, I don't have to shuffle paperwork anymore,
Was it a harder transition to switch to management?
Not really. I mean, I became a manager in 1996, so I put in about 25 years in the management ranks. And I had, I worked at a number of different airports and our seaports as well. But for the most part, it wasn't too difficult of a transition. I would move from different processes. And then when I did my training in DC and did the world traveling, that was kind of cool because, you do a seaport training 1 week in Colombia. And then the next week you travel to Ghana and do an anti-terrorism class,
Jeez, that's awesome.
That's wild.
So it was nuts. In Thailand, then you'd go and it was a border inspection thing where you'd go to a port of entry and help, it's interesting, but the United States has built these training academies in about 5 different countries around the world, and they're just like they are in the States. You've got mock ports of entry, you've got exam rooms, you've got the maze and the catwalk above so the instructors can watch, and room clearing and that kind of thing for anti-terrorism and all that stuff. It's really nice. And we have one in El Salvador. We have one in Africa, in Botswana, one in Budapest, Hungary, one in Thailand, and I'm missing one somewhere. So I went to all of those, and they're pretty nice, but they're almost identical to what you have in the States, because there's one in Glencoe, Georgia, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and they pretty much patterned it after that.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Evan,
a lot of these, like you've seen in the news about this USAID funding, it's under a lot of scrutiny from the Doge people. And some of these things were funded by these trainings that we were on were funded by USAID. A lot of taxpayer dollars to help other border agencies and help them with training. Have you seen that show on Nat Geo, To Catch a Smuggler?
I've heard of it. I've never I know of the show. Yes, I've just never watched.
There's a show. It's called To Catch a Smuggler, and well, you have it in the United States, and it'll show CBP. But it also they have a Peru centered one and a Colombia centered one. And the Colombia one is really interesting because they're constantly catching people going through the body scanner as they're leaving the country with cocaine. And kind of a funny story. I was teaching a class in Colombia, and a few weeks later, I was in Brazil, and I put on the TV, and To Catch a Smuggler was on, in Portuguese. And some of the students that I had in my class, from a few weeks earlier are on there, catching smugglers. It was pretty cool. Nice. But the thing is, they didn't need my class. They already knew how to do all that stuff.
Nice.
So,
Right.
But the U.S. has helped fund a lot of these programs. So, you'll see this in these foreign nations where they're actually catching drugs as it goes outbound. And a lot of the equipment was provided by the United States. The training was provided by the United States.
Gotcha. Evan, we're right at that 45-minute mark. It happened really fast. Evan, I mean, again, I hope that one other day down the road, we'd love to have you back on, because I feel like we just kind of got into the level 100s here. I think it would be really nice to get you down here down the road, but we definitely appreciate you and sharing everything that you have. I mean, that was a lot of awesome new information for me that I got to learn. You heard Damon down there, Damon Johnsey. I don't want to speak for you guys, but thank you, Evan. I mean,
appreciate it for sure. Absolutely.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Real quick before we go, I do got to share a story. So at work, I worked at a waste to energy power plant, and we had all law enforcement agencies come and burn evidence, old case files, drugs, whatever. And I mean, we had some hardcore seasoned narc officers from like Stockton, Oakland, and everybody's super chill when they come there.
So
when U.S. Custom and Borders come, they come in full gear, helmets and everything. They're all just like this. They make sure everything's locked. They got guys positioned everywhere. What's the difference from these guys like running into gang members daily versus the guys at the border that feel like at our facility that we do this for everybody? They're like, hey, what are you doing? Not pointing the gun, but they're like,
well, in my last years, I managed the use of force team. And so we would have those runs every quarter to empty out our seizure vault. And it's tactically coordinated beforehand. We don't let the dates out or anything like that. And they go in a convoy. You got vehicles in front and lead and back, and they're armed to the teeth. And because you got a lot of dope that's going there, that's getting inside. Right. So it's taken very, very seriously. I didn't realize you were working at that place, because I knew they were heading out to the Central Valley. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Full circle, Evan. Full circle. Welcome to the Dude Network. All right, everybody. Don't forget, tomorrow night, the after party, Sunday, another foodie show. Be a friend, tell a friend. Make sure you subscribe to that podcast for us. That'd be great. And share it to somebody that you think would find this show interesting. And I guarantee you know somebody, or a 5 or 10 that would. This has been absolutely awesome. What a fun deep dive into something that I never thought I'd get a high level education on. Again, thanks to Evan. Thank you, Damon. Thank you, Johnsy. Thank you, Garage Beer. Yeah, we'll see you on the other side, everybody, on the next time, tomorrow night, 9:00, right here on the Dude Network after party.